Right, here we go.
Here we go. Woo! Woo! Here comes my favorite part, right here. There it is.
Yes, that was a nice touch. Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Timothy. Good morning, everybody who is watching us on YouTube and also LinkedIn and listening to us in Clubhouse as well. It is September the 15th. Back home, it is the first school day of the year. But here in Japan, it is just the middle of September. So it is a pleasure to have you with us this morning again for the 188th episode of Japanese Politics One-on-One with Timothy Langley once again.
How about that?
Yes, the CEO of Langley Esquire, the government affairs and public relations consultancy firm in Tokyo. So, Timothy, I will give you the floor or the screen first before we do anything else so that we can hear from you about what the topics are going to be today, the topics you will talk about. So the floor is yours and let's dive straight into it.
Thank you very much, Maya, and good morning, everybody. It's the 188th episode of Japan Politics One-on-One, where we open the mics and allow you to participate. And I think today will be particularly active. Our audience, in fact, has grown tremendously as a consequence of what's going on in Japanese politics. Globally, people are interested in what's going on and what it means, and you're going to hear it first here. In fact, it is so epical what's going on that Dan Harada and I... Maya, can you turn off your mic? I can hear the cat screaming.
Yes.
Thank you. What's going on now is so important, and it is so dramatic, the changes that are going on or that are anticipated, that Dan Harada and I will give you a briefing 3 days before the election on the 27th. The election's on the 27th. Dan and I will give you a noontime briefing on the 24th and tell you about what's going on, what's the culmination, what's the prognosis. So please stay tuned to that. We'll get another reminder to you at the end of this program, won't we, Maya? And just in anticipation of that, I want to talk about some of the things. We don't go into deep depth about them, but they are important. The yen is at 140.8 to the dollar. The dollar is 140.8 to the yen, actually. And this is the lowest it's been. There was a press conference earlier this week, and then the Trump and Harris debate. The dollar took a fall, thereby enhancing the value of the yen almost by 1 yen after that debate. And over the last couple of weeks, it has just continued to strengthen. So last week it was 142. The week before it was 146, then 146, and then 147. And you remember probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, it was scratching at 160. So there's a lot of action going on there. There's a lot of action and criticism being directed to the Bank of Japan and what's going on with the economy here and the inflation. So that continues to be hot. The LDP, as you know, started their race on Thursday with 9 contenders. Yoko Kamikawa was the last person to throw in her hat. She did that on Wednesday. And so there's that part of the briefing will take up a lot of time, I think, probably the majority of it. Japan ranks number 2 in the world in terms of best countries. Those of us that live here, I think most of our audience, the Japan hands, have spent time here. Doesn't come as any surprise, but the ranking was, what was it? It was number 6 last year in terms of global rankings. So it's jumped up considerably, probably as a consequence of COVID being pretty much behind us, but also the tremendous influx of tourists coming into Japan. In no other country in the world are the tourists flocking like they are in Japan. Japan ranks number 2 this year. The United States is number 3. England is at number 8. Switzerland is number 1. North Korea this week on Thursday. Thursday was just a really active day militarily. North Korea fired off several missiles. They all landed in the Sea of Japan, outside of Japan's exclusive economic zone. But it is another bit of rattling. If you looked at the newspaper yesterday, it showed an undated photo of Kim Jong-un at a centrifuge facility to produce uranium for nuclear weapons. and his statement that there is no limit to how many nuclear weapons we intend to create. We haven't had that nuclear test that we have been waiting for, but in fact, the missile technology and the missile tests continue unabated. It's been a while since he's been on the flare, but when it happens, we report it to you. The Soviet, the Russian, you heard maybe 2 weeks ago, there was a Chinese surveillance plane that broached, that violated Japan airspace in the southern part of Japan through one of the islands. And this week, a Soviet surveillance plane circled Japan up from Hokkaido, came down the Sea of Japan, came up to the Pacific, ended up back in Hokkaido and flew out. Japanese jets were scrambled. This is the first time this has happened in 5 years. The last time it was a set of Soviet bombers that flew by Japan. The jets were scrambled. Also no invasion of airspace or Japanese exclusive space at that time, but it is unusual that this is going on at the same time that Russia and China are having naval drills in the South China Sea. This, President Putin said, is the largest naval exercise in 3 decades that the two countries have had. So it is something to watch out for. And at the same time, the Canadian defense minister visited Japan. I don't know, you could say finally the Canadians are starting to pick up the pace. The Canadians are joining the Australians, other Five Eye countries. So Canada is a Five Eye country. Japan is not. Japan desperately wants to be included. So this visit by the Defense Minister Blair is pretty important. They want to further enhance the collaboration and the integration of Canadian naval, air, and ground forces with Japan. Many countries have already done that. England has done that. Australia has done it. New Zealand is thinking about it. The Philippines is doing it. Many of these countries are talking about reciprocal rights. Canada is not quite there, but they're thinking about it. They talked about it with the defense minister this last week. So this movement, it's unstoppable. It just continues to go. And at the same time, the Russians, the Chinese, and their that sphere of influence continues to grow. This incursion by the Soviet plane over, just encircling Japan there's a lot going on there, and you have to keep on top of it. Alberto Fujimori, I think most people might remember him. He was the president of Peru, born of Japanese parents and emigrated to Peru, had a rocket rise career there, became president of Peru. You might remember, I think it was in 1996, that the Japan ambassador's residence was invaded by terrorists. Hostages were taken, and that was when Mr. Fujimori was president. And there was a rescue operation widely seen throughout the world, and he was held as a hero for rescuing all of these people. He was caught on an aide was doing accepting a bribe or something like that. And like in many countries, Peruvian politics is fractious, and they had a movement to arrest him, and he fled to Japan, and he lived in Japan from 2005, and he was accepted by. Am I still on, Maya? Okay. There's no extradition treaty between Peru and Japan, so he lived here. He made friends with people. He actually ran for a seat, an upper house seat, several years later after he left Japan, with one of these minor opposition parties. He didn't win, but he just died this last week, and I think that's a passing of a very influential and significant figure, not just in Japanese diplomacy and politics, but also globally. I think a lot of will be said and written about him. Trump-Harris, they had a discussion on what was it, Thursday? Widely watched and reported here in Japan, parsed, snipped, evaluated, and commented on. That will continue to go on. I'm not going to make any comments one way or the other, even though Cam is going to tease me and try and get me to say something that's going to get me into trouble. Thanks, Cam. And finally, Maya, you can go pretty soon. into the sponsorship of our program. But I also wanted to report that Mount Fuji closed its climbing season this week. That's pretty big news. A little bit sudden for me. I wasn't expecting it. They put up barriers there, and the Japanese press just loves to watch these foreigners and film these foreigners trying to get through or trying to climb over the barriers, and it's just kind of hilarious. But I guess if you came to Japan with your girlfriend and you always had it set that you're going to climb Mount Fuji, and then you get up there and there are barricades, maybe you'll say, let's just go. Nobody's watching, but everybody's watching, in fact. So that's the main tie-up, Maya. I'd like to turn it over to you and then get into some of the beefier parts through our Japan Politics One-on-One. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy. Well, I would like to say thank you to our friends and sponsors once again this Sunday. And the first one of them is Kanchu.com and James Howell. So as you already know, Kanchu.com offers bilingual services to individuals who want to buy and sell real estate in Tokyo and Yokohama. The company also does property management and investment property. So if you want to work with them, if you're worried about your language skills, Japanese language skills, please reach out to James at Kanachu.com, James Howell. You can find him on LinkedIn or also in the description of the video on YouTube. There are contact details there. Reach out to him and work with him because they'll meet your needs, they'll customize their services to you so that you can actually achieve what you have in mind. So, Timothy, thank you once again for giving me this opportunity to say thank you to James and Kanachu.com. Let's continue with the main part of this briefing now, because I can see that there are quite a few things to actually discuss today. Talk about... Yeah.
Yes, there really are. It's such an active time here in Japanese politics. Most of the time, for those of you who are longtime listeners, and we appreciate that, we talk about geopolitics, military, and in addition to politics. But today, it's almost all politics. There's just so much going on that's so critical. And so we can get into the personalities, but it takes a lot of time. And I'm not sure that everybody is that interested in the personalities of the 9 candidates who are running. So let's push that to the Q&A, and we can go as deep as you want, but let's just rely on the questions that come up. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but the campaign kicked off on Thursday. 9 candidates, the largest in Japanese post-war history. 2 women, everybody from the LDP vying for the presidency. And there was a question asked last week. I forget who made the question, Maya, but it was about who's paying for this and how much of the public funds are going into this presidential race. Who was that, Maya?
Oh, forgive me, I don't really remember at the moment.
I want to say Blair or something like that.
Maybe that was Byron Johnston.
Byron, that's it. Yeah.
Byron.
So the question was, this LDP race, it's taking up so much time and so much news. Who actually pays for it? And this is an LDP race. It has nothing to do with the national or the public funds. This is just a private matter within the LDP. So no public funds are being used for it. It's just a race to see who's going to become president of the LDP. Once it gets into national politics or even regional politics, then there might be public funds that are spent for that. But this is a big deal. 9 people, and they're on a 7-day countryside campaign right now. So let me see. Yesterday they were in Nagoya. Today they are in Fukushima. And in every place that they're going, they have maybe a stand or like a studio perhaps, where the 9 candidates, can you imagine the logistics of doing that and how exhausting that must be for all of them to travel together to these during these 7 days. Then the campaign will stop and we'll get into the election period. So after that, that's when Dan and I will give you a briefing on what's going on, who looks like they're up on front, who looks like they are on second base. And as you know, there's going to be 2 rounds here. Of the 9 candidates, it is unlikely that anybody's going to get 50%. It could happen. 9 candidates, whoever in the first round gets 50%, they become prime minister, or they become president of the LDP. Not prime minister yet. Mr. Kishida is still prime minister. If nobody gets more than 50%, then there's a runoff, and the top two become candidates in the second round. And all of this happens within the span of an hour inside the LDP up on the top floor, up on the 8th floor. So until then, the candidates, and there's really done a good job. I think NHK and the National Press Club has presented a good opportunity for voters to examine and look at the candidates. People have an image in their mind about each of them, about Ishiba, about Koizumi, about Motegi. They kind of sense what their personality is, but to see them in a kind of a confrontational situation, or even, for example, on NHK the other day, just an opportunity for them to express something. They don't have much time, and whatever it is that they say, it's very valuable real estate in terms of how much time people get to create an image or to project a stance. So it's kind of unfair, but I think politics, it's in America too. It's kind of unfair. It's not really the full Monty that you want, but it is what you're fed. And I think in the remaining time that we have in the campaigning, countryside campaigning, you'll get a good sense of that. And there are pretty much paths that have already been carved. We can look at who endorsed each of the candidates, and we can look at how many people have already kind of aligned to various candidates, all 9 of them. We can get into that because it's very interesting to look at who endorses who, what factions they come from, who has the most women as endorsers, what's the youngest collective age of their endorsers, that sort of thing, and come up with some sort of assessment of that. But let's push that off into the Q&A. I'm curious, what your level of interest and appetite is, and we can deal with it to the degree that satisfies you. The Constitutional Democratic Party also started their campaign. They campaigned starting last Saturday, and it will end on the 23rd. I think that's in just a couple of days, next Monday, actually. And there are 4 candidates, and it looks like, I love the way that they're doing it. They're actually pursuing what the LDP candidates are saying and coming up with their talking points. And it doesn't seem to be as fractious as it might be with the LDP. There are 4 candidates, one from the upper house, first-term female candidate for Constitutional Democratic Party leadership, the former prime minister when the LDP fell out of power, the individual who formed the Constitutional Democratic Party from the pieces that were left from having lost the election and the LDP coming back into power, and Mr. Ichiro Ozawa rabble-rousing and creating and cobbling together. So it was this individual. And then the young up-and-coming star, Mr. Izumi, who they elected just recently in the last election to become the president. So of these 4, it looks like the fight will just be really between the 2, the former prime minister and then the former leader of the Constitutional Democratic Party, the person who created the manifesto, who they really have good legs. Both of them have good legs, and I think that's where the race will come down to. And similarly to the LDP, they will have a first round, and if somebody gets 50%, that person becomes the leader. And if it's the second round, then it's they have a runoff, and it looks like they'll probably have a runoff. Because there is popularity with Mr. Izumi and with the upper house candidate as well. So there's something to look forward to. They have their race, they select their leader, and then 3 days later, the LDP has their race. The next day, Komeito has the end of their convention, and they've also decided to elect a new leader. Mr. Yamaguchi, who was a 15-year leader of Komeito, who, as you know, is in a coalition with the LDP. As a consequence of this LDP Komeito coalition, in the upper house and in the lower house, the LDP and Komeito, they hold more than a majority in the upper house, a supermajority, to pass bills and to get legislation through. So it's a strong just because of the numbers and because of the mandate that gives them, it's rather strong. But with a new leader and with the LDP going through their machinations and what's going to happen as a consequence of that, we really don't know. I think it's safe to say that the LDP will be changed dramatically after the election. And the LDP has already decided that there will be an election. So this came up earlier in this week. It's not like the prime minister decided it, because Mr. Kishida is not going to, he could decide that, but he's not going to decide that. We're in the middle of a presidential election for the LDP. But the LDP as a whole has decided, let's go through the presidential, and then when the president is selected or elected, let's have him become prime minister 2 or 3 days later. On a Monday, let's convene an extraordinary diet, and then let's make sure that we close down the House. So that decision has already been made. The negotiations between the LDP and Komeito to make that happen has already been decided, and they announced it. So the announcement was that there will be an election, but they're leaving it to the prime minister, when he becomes prime minister, to decide when to do it, how to do it. There are 2 dates, the 20th and the 27th of October. Those are the 2 most prime dates. It could be pushed back a little bit farther, but I kind of doubt it. There's just too much going on nationally, internationally. The schedule for the new prime minister is already booked, and it's full of G20 and other Pan-Asia conventions and symposia, where his presence is pretty much required. So that's, in the next 10 days, there's just going to be an enormous amount of stuff happening. The National Convention for Komeito will be the day after the LDP election. And typically with the Komeito, there is no there's no contesting of who's going to be the leader. It's basically by acclamation. That's the policy, that's the philosophy of Komeito. And so the Secretary General, Mr. Ishii, is going to rise to that. He's the only candidate that is being run as a candidate for replacing Mr. Yamaguchi. So that's a kind of a done deal. So at the end of this month, we're going to have we're not going to have a new prime minister. The new prime minister will be elected by the parliament on October 1st. But by the end of this month, Komeito will have a new leader, the Constitutional Democratic Party will have a new leader, and the LDP will have a new leader. There's a lot going on elsewhere, but that's about it for national politics. There is a fight going on in Hyogo Prefecture with the governor. You might have heard about this, that the governor took office. He was the new, fresh governor, replacing a governor who had been there for 3 election terms. So pretty much the Hyogo Prefecture was pat and stayed and stable because of his leadership. He changed and a new governor comes in, and this new governor was elected based on LDP and Ishin support. So Ishin was very excited about that, because not only do they have Osaka's prefectural government and local government and almost all of the national lower house seats in Osaka, but in the contiguous prefecture, Hyogo, they helped elect the governor. So it kind of suggested the expanse and the growth of Ishin, which was great music, especially in terms of when the next election will be. The fact that he came under fire is a bit of a black eye to Ishin. I think people just draw that conclusion. I don't know if there's a direct connection there, but people will draw that conclusion in any event. And there is a no confidence motion that's being offered. I think the no confidence motion will be offered on, on Thursday, this Thursday coming up. That no confidence motion is being authored by the Constitutional Democratic Party, and it's being co-signed by the Liberal Democratic Party, one of the sponsors for this new governor. His name is Motohiko Saito. You've probably seen him on TV fighting and embattled. Many people are giving him lists of names that want him to resign. And he's fighting. He's saying, I was elected by the prefecture to be the governor, and by God, I'm going to be the governor. And I know there are people that don't like what I've asked them to do or instructed them to do as governor, and then there's a lot of criticism. And yes, it's unfortunate that two of the bureaucrats killed themselves, and they blame me for that, for power harassment. But I'm just doing my job, and people, I guess, were just a little bit too cozy with their situation and now have been lambasting me. But there's more going on than just this power harassment. So I'm going to fight. And if you pass, or if you go for a no confidence motion, I'm going to close down the National Assembly for the prefecture. So similar to national politics, the prime minister can close down the House. If there's a no confidence motion, he can decide that the election for the lower house needs to be refreshed. Similarly, with the governor, he can do that with the prefectural assembly as well. And that's what the governor is threatening. He's saying, if you put this no confidence motion, I'm the governor and I don't deserve this, and I'm going to continue to be governor. And if you're going to do that, then I'm going to close down the House, and let's let the voters decide. So there is a lot going on in Hyogo Prefecture. It will culminate this week, and we'll report on it on when we get back together next Sunday, obviously. Let me see what else. The LDP has already decided for the election on the 27th. We talked about that, and I wanted to talk a little bit about, I think this is the last point I wanted to make. There are two more points I wanted to make. The emperor's role coming up now. So as you might know, the emperor is the head of state. The prime minister is not the head of state. The emperor is the head of state. But his role in Japanese politics and in the constitution is very limited. He opens the diet, he closes the diet, he accepts ambassadorial appointments. So if you are appointed by the country as ambassador, you present your credentials to the emperor, and until then, you're not ambassador. So you must present yourself to the ambassador and be accepted there. His role is to open the national parliament when there is an election. So we've got two things that are going on here. He's going to be very busy. There is actually a throne. Most people don't know this. There is a golden throne in the parliament where the emperor seats. It's only used in the convocation of the diet. And that's in the upper house. So when the LDP finally figures out who is going to be their president, that will be on a Friday. On the following Monday, they are going to launch an extraordinary session of the diet so that they can appoint the new prime minister. So that will be a vote from the upper house and the lower house, who's going to be our new prime minister. And because of Komeito and LDP in this, they will vote for their candidate, and that candidate, who is going to be the president of the LDP, will be ushered in as the new prime minister. He will more likely than not announce his cabinet the same day. So can you imagine? You don't even know if you're going to be president or not on Friday, but on Monday, if you become president, you need to have your cabinet in place too. 22 members in the formal cabinet have to be decided. And so who is voting for who, on what side, who make the endorsement, how nasty this campaign, this countryside campaign gets over the next 7 days. And in the last week, then everything will be coming out in the wash. And that's why Dan and I are going to be talking about it on Thursday. But can you imagine the difficulty that must be if you're going to become prime minister and have the cabinet already lined up? It's got to be a very daunting task. And this is by candidates who don't have the backing of the LDP machinery to support them in doing that. They've got their own teams. And so it's wow, what a lot of tension and a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes there. In any event, it's an extraordinary session of the diet. The emperor will come in and open it, and then the prime minister will say, I'm going to close down the House, and we're going to go for a general election. He needs to do that when the diet is in session. And then they will close down the House for the election, so the emperor needs to come back over and close down the House. Then, and actually you need to have his authority and his signature to close down the House or to open the House. Then there will be an election, and depending on the day, if it's the 20th or the 27th, it needs to fall on a Sunday. It gives the prime minister and his cabinet very little time to schedule that election. And then when the election starts, he's basically prime minister temporarily, because even the prime minister has to go up for election. And it could be that we have the election and the person who was just finished the presidential election, who became prime minister, if he's not elected again as a member of the Diet, he can't be prime minister. So it's a very complicated series. So if the election date is on the 20th, there is, I think, a 9-day campaign period. If it's on the 27th, I think the calculations turn out to be a 10-day campaign period, ending on a Saturday, and then people vote on the following Sunday. The election is over on Sunday. Then all of the new members, they get dressed up, and then they go to the Diet for the first time. The emperor needs to come back over again, open the Diet, and they will have another session to welcome in the new cabinet, the new prime minister, and all of the new members of the lower house. There's a lot going on there. We could get into it a little bit more. I just don't know how much you want to get into the weeds, but we are prepared if you want to. We'll just open it up to Q&A later. So I hope this is enough to kind of wet your whistle and keep you updated on what's going on in Japanese politics. So Maya, with that, let me turn it over to you for the Q&A portion of our series.
Thank you, Timothy. Well, that was really informative. There are quite a few questions actually already there, but I know that you'll bear with me and everybody else here. So before that, though, let me take a brief, a brief moment to say thank you to our other sponsor, and our other sponsor is Houze Inc. So Houze Inc. offers bilingual services once again in Japanese and English in custom home design, construction, and renovations, plus commercial building construction. If you want to benefit from their services, you need to connect with Hana Urushizawa Howell, either on LinkedIn or through their website. So Hana Urushizawa Howell is on LinkedIn. Also, you can find her contact details in the description of the YouTube video. So go ahead and do that, because you're not going to have any regrets. So I could see you dancing and trying to distract me from what I was talking about, from what I was talking about. So, well, next time you do that, I'll show you part of the screen for everybody to see. Right. Okay. So good. Now we move into the questions and answers, that session. Before I read the first question, though, I would like you to remember, actually, to give us a sign that you're watching us, that you're here, by hitting like or subscribing or sharing your thoughts with us on LinkedIn or YouTube, even in Clubhouse. So, I will read them out to Timothy so that we can have a discussion now. Timothy, the first question came from Byron, once again, today.
Hi, Byron. Thank you for attending.
It is on LinkedIn. Actually, it is a comment followed by a question. So, yes, I'll read it out to you. Let me get there first. Okay, here we go. Here we go. So, Byron says, okay, today the LDP is at its weakest and worst state. Hence, I don't agree with the predictions of a snap national election. If the new PM forces the issue, he or she may even become the shortest-lived PM in the world, due to huge potential loss of LDP seats nationwide if elections are held in November this year. Rather, isn't it more likely that the new PM will merely settle into office and plan the parliamentary elections for October 2025, by when it is constitutionally mandated?
Byron, that is a great question. I don't know what you do for a living, but your questions are really piercing and really, really spot on. So the issue of having a snap election, when you think about it, actually, people would say the same thing that you did. Why are you having an election? You're at your weakest point right now. Wait for you to be up. So actually, Mr. Kishida had been waiting for months and months just for a breath of fresh air, just a breeze to fill his sails. You remember that? And he didn't get it. He didn't get it when he went to Camp David. He didn't get it when he had the by-elections. He just was grasping at anything. It never happened for him. And the reason why he wanted it then, and the reason why they want it now, is the breath of fresh air, that breeze that's coming in, is number one, there is a brief honeymoon when there's a new prime minister. And you can imagine it now. People are just anticipating and waiting for some new fresh blood. And so, for example, if Koizumi becomes the new prime minister, or the new president of the LDP, yes, you can imagine that this uplifting of the voters, yay, we've got a movie star and we're going to be back on track. People will say that and they'll go out and vote. But the more important issue, and I don't mean to put too much weight on Koizumi because I think it's unjustified, but he does have a significant amount of weight. But the more important point is that they're going to get their asses kicked no matter what. The longer they wait, the bigger the whooping. They know that. So if they wait until the formal time for the lower house term of office to end in October, it's going to get far worse. So they're trying to tear the Band-Aid off now when it's not as bad. So that means that there is more bad news that they anticipate, either through the Unification Church or the kickback scandal or some sort of thing that they know that's coming up. It's not going to bode well for the LDP. And like you said, the LDP is not at its zenith by any stretch of the term. It is down, and they figure that they're going to lose maybe 50, maybe 60 seats, but let's do that now and get it over with. It extends the term, so we don't have to have that lower house election in October. The 4-year term starts fresh after this election. And maybe the dynamics are that when it rolls around, they will have a snap election at the same time as the upper house election, which is later this year. But you're absolutely right. The prime minister should be focusing on what they're going to do to prevent the LDP from losing more seats. But I think right now the cards are that are dealt. Do it now, get it over with, so that the hits that come, at least you've got a fresh prime minister, a fresh cabinet. The things, the garbage and the kickback scandal and Mr. Kishida not being very dynamic and all of those things, they're behind us. It's old story. Let's go with something fresh and new. Right. And I think I think between the election and maybe January, you'll have a bit of a honeymoon. So I think it'll be kind of a good time, but it really depends on who's going to be the prime minister, how he does on the global scene, and what happens in the meantime that we just can't predict. There's a lot of things going on geopolitically that can impact Japan and start a bit of a panic. And then there's also what's going on in the United States with the dollar-yen value, and also who's going to become president of the United States. So there's a lot going on there. It's all going to happen very quickly.
Very quickly, yes. And Timothy, just the other day when we were talking about possible snap elections and so on, you also made one point, which I remember, that we may as well see a new coalition government after the general election in the end of this year. And I'm curious, could you please share your thoughts about this a little bit? Because it's not a given, of course. Things change so fast and so in such an unexpected ways, but this is definitely one of the possibilities there, isn't it?
Definitely one of the possibilities. So if you talk about a coalition government, there's 3 possible candidates. You've got the Democratic People's Party, and there are a couple of people who were formerly Democratic People's Party members who have actually endorsed one of the candidates who's vying to become president of the LDP now. Mm-hmm. So there is a bit of closeness there. It's not as far apart from the conservative ideals of the LDP, but they're not very large in number. So there wouldn't be good bang for the buck, but it might be easy to get them. The other candidate is Ishin. Ishin is not the number 1 opposition party. The Constitutional Democratic Party is by far the main opposition party. And I think, depending on who their president is, so the fight going on there, we talked about the 4 candidates and the middle 2. The 2 candidates there hold different views. One says, let's accommodate the LDP to the degree we can and try and amalgamate, the election forces so that we can form some sort of a coalition, a possible coalition. And the other candidate is saying, we want to be the number one opposition. We want to give people an opportunity to have a different view on how Japan should be run. That's going to be us. We're going to kick their butts, and we're going to come back. So one of the candidates can say, rightly, I was prime minister. I used to be prime minister. I know how to do it. I will take the nation forward. So you've got that fight going. So it's unlikely the Constitutional Democratic Party would be in a coalition, but you never know, depending on
Right.
who becomes their leader. And Ishin is Ishin's having a little bit of trouble. It's not because of what's going on with the Hyogo governor, but they had ups and then they've got downs, and they're kind of down now. You will see what happens with Ishin in this next election. So the next election is complicated for a couple of reasons. Number one, Ishin is trying to put candidates in all of the election districts it can. It can't
Right.
satisfy all of them. It can't find a candidate in all of the election districts, and plus it's very costly. The other complication is that this is the first time for 10 plus 10, the gerrymandering, where some prefectures that have lost populations in the countryside are losing a member of the lower house. And then there are other prefectures or other election districts that are gaining a member. So it's a new member. He doesn't have a legacy. He's not repeating anybody else. It's an open field for a new party to come in, or for a new candidate, somebody fresh. So there's going to be there's going to be at least 10 where there's a lot of excitement going on. This is all going to happen very quickly because 10 plus 10 will be exercised for the first time. A lot of people will lose out as a consequence of that. And we already know that the LDP is going to suffer a serious defeat, not only because of the kickback scandal. So people know you received thousands and thousands of yen just because you're a politician and you put it in your pocket. You didn't even report the taxes, and you're a member of parliament. Get the hell out of here. You've got those kinds of candidates, but you also have candidates with some sort of influence, maybe an over influence of the Abe faction in the Unification Church. People haven't forgotten that one. And if you're in a race and your opposition party was affiliated with the Unification Church, which that deal is still not over. It's not reported very much, but it's still not over. It's easy for you to gain some extra points. That means the LDP is even on a further back leg, rocking, and the contenders actually have a little bit more of an advantage. So it's a pretty exciting, dynamic time.
It is indeed. Okay, so thank you for the analysis there. And I'm moving slowly into talking about different candidates within the LDP, candidates for the presidential seat there. So, and I'll start with one question which we had on the video last year. So that question is well, we don't have the full handle name, but it is from somebody called MPR or yes. So the question was about actually Sanae Takaichi, and it reads like, well, 4 years ago, Sanae Takaichi had more support as a candidate, potential candidate for the presidential seat of the LDP. It seems that this support has somewhat decreased. So are we going to see the support increase, and what are the possible reasons for, the waning support for her?
Okay, so who is this question from?
Oh, BPR or
Okay,
NPR.
somebody that's coming in with a pseudonym, right?
Yes.
And this individual has asked questions before, good questions. So
Right, yes, yes.
yeah, so I'd like you to come out of the bushes and either hit like or connect with us, because your questions are really good. Sanae Takaichi came into the candidacy last time under Mr. Abe.
Mm-hmm.
And Abe liked her. He didn't endorse anybody in his faction. She wasn't even in his faction. And he
All right.
endorsed her as president.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the whole foundation of her her role. And to her credit, she is a sterling individual. She is smart. She is really a excellent a politician, and she won a role inside the LDP headquarters, not inside the cabinet. But she's done an excellent job there.
Mhm.
Is that right? Did she get into the cabinet post? She did
I
get the economic security, right?
I
So
think so, but I need to
yeah,
check that.
so she got that role as a consequence of being a contender for president, and then using that as to leapfrog into the candidacy once again. So she's a candidate once again, but in the interim, Mr. Abe has died. And in the interim, the Abe faction has kind of dissipated. So it's still there as a policy group. The members gather, they're still friendly with each other. Maybe they vote in coalition with one another, but it's kind of, I don't know, it sounds rude if I say it, it's kind of leaderless. And as a consequence of that, there are voters, endorsers for her candidacy in the Abe faction, but she's picking them up from elsewhere too. And we can get into that analysis, who gave her the endorsement. There were quite a few from the Abe faction.
Yes. Shall I bring
Um,
this?
yes.
Okay. Here. Well, it's kind of, yeah, it is a little bit small. The letters are small, but we've got, so
Okay. So it's good. You don't need to see the actual names, but you can tell by the columns who is getting a lot of endorsements or support and who is getting less of them. So
yes.
this chart, this was produced by the LDP. I think maybe on Thursday, once the candidates were decided. Of the 367 LDP members, there are 210 that are listed here. 210 of the 367. So when the vote comes on Friday, who's going to be president of the LDP, this kind of indicates how they're going to vote. So nobody's going to get 50% there. But it does indicate, and there'll be changes and shifts because people will say, look, we voted for you, but you didn't become a candidate, and now we're in the second round, so my vote is going to go to somebody else. But the columns here, if you could follow it, I'm going to go from
Ishiba-san,
left
maybe?
to right. Yeah,
From
you've got
left to
Mr. Ishiba. He's got
mhm.
24. You've got Koizumi, who has 26. You've got Takaichi, who has 22. Moving over, you got Koizumi. There's a long list there. Koizumi, he's got 36. You've got Hayashi with 26. You've got Konotaro with 17. You've got Motegi with 20. You've got Katsunobu at 13. And then you have Kamikawa at 16.
Maybe
So that's
50. Yeah,
maybe 15, yes. So
15,
that's
yeah.
how that chart looks, and it's very instructive. You don't need to see the names of the people that are there, but let me just go into it. And once again, I'll go from this side to the other side, starting first with Mr. Ishiba. He's got 7 from his own faction that are voting for him. I'm sorry, 7 with no faction who voted for him in this list of 24. There are 7 that came from no factions. 5 came from Nikai faction. 2 came from former Democratic People Party faction. 4 of them are from the upper house. The average time that they have won is 5.6 times. They've won 5.6 elections. These are lower house members.
Mm-hmm.
The upper house members have a different calculation because the upper house members have 6-year terms. They're never interrupted. Lower house are almost always interrupted. And the average age for Ishiba is 63 years old. Let's shift over to see about Mr. Koizumi. He's got, let me see, 8 independent, unaffiliated with any factions or political policy groups. He's got 5 members who are from the Suga faction, and 4.3 is the number of times they have generally won in elections. So they're not they're relatively young. If you're a 5-term member, then you're in the senior area. But if you've only been there 3 times, maybe even 4, you're still a junior candidate. 4 are from the upper house. The average age for Mr. Koizumi is 55 years old. He has 4 women. Moving over to, who is it now? It's Takaichi. She's got 15 people who have endorsed her from the Abe faction, 3 from Nikai, 2 from Aso. The average win rate is 4.5 terms for the people who have endorsed her or voted for her. The average age is 62 years old. She's got 2 women, and 9 of them are from the upper house, so that's a lot. Moving over, you've got Kobayashi, Mr. Kobayashi. He's the youngest and has the youngest age group of voters. But look how many people he's got there. That's enormous. That's really catches your eye when you look at Mr. Kobayashi. He's got more first-term members who are endorsing or voting for him than anybody else. And 2 are from the upper house, only 1 woman, 5 are from Nikai, 4 are from Abe, 4 are from Aso, 2 are from Moriyama, 1 is from Kishida, and 1 is from Suga. So you can see that there's a broad swath of people who are endorsing him. Moving over to Mr. Hayashi, currently the Chief Cabinet Secretary. He's got 15 from his faction, which is the Kishida faction, 15 there. 10 of them are from the upper house. You'll remember that he was a upper house candidate until he switched houses recently. So when people do that, if they're an upper house member, they switch to the lower house. It is because they're telling everybody, I want to become prime minister. So he's already had this in motion for a while. The average win rate for him is 4.2 terms. So it's a lot of junior members, but he's got some senior members there. No woman in his endorsement field. The next one over is Konotaro. He's got 18 from the Aso faction. The average wins are 4.5, so it's relatively young. The junior members. 5 are from the upper house, and the average age is 58 years old, so it's relatively young. Mr. Motegi has 14 from his faction, as you might anticipate. It's his own faction. 14 there. 3 of them are from Abe faction, 2 of them from the Aso faction. 1 is independent. There are 7 first-timers that are voting for Mr. Motegi. He was the Secretary General, so doing a lot of favors for these first-time members. I guess that paid off. 6 of them are from the upper house. Let's see. He's got the lowest win rate of all of the candidates. The average win rate is 3.5 terms. And he's got the youngest number of people who are voting for him, as you can kind of surmise, at 56 years of age. Kato Sensei has 6 from his own faction, 4 are from the Abe faction, 4 from the Nikai faction, 4 independents, 1 from Aso, 1 from Moriyama. So he's a seasoned politician. He's got breadth and support across the spectrum. 6 of his endorsers are from the upper house. That's pretty high. The average win rate is 4.6 times. The average age is 59 years old. There are 5 women voting for him. There are 5 first-timers in his camp. 2 of them are from the upper house, from the lower house, and 3 of them are from the upper house. Excuse me. And finally, we come to Kamikawa, the foreign minister. She's got 7 women who have voted for her. That's the highest number of women who have endorsed one of the 9 candidates. 7 of them are from the upper house, which is rather high. The win rate is 5 times. The candidates who have voted for her that are in the lower house have been there for 5 terms, so relatively senior. The average age is 59 years old. 9 of them are from the Aso faction, and 4 of them are from the Kishida faction. She's from the Kishida faction. She got 4, and Mr. Hayashi is also from the Kishida. From the Kishida faction, and he had 15. So if you're going to toss a coin, and it's a race between Mr. Hayashi and Miss Kamikawa, already you know that the die is cast for Mr. Hayashi. So I know that's a lot of information. If you're following the synopsis that we produce every week, maybe 2 or 3 days after this briefing, I'll get these details for you so you can study them. but it's all indicative of what the race is shaping up to be, what it looks like. Oh, there we go. There we go. The cat is alive. Don't introduce your cat to, Springfield in the United States, Maya. I have it on good evidence.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for the analysis, Timothy, and the details there. So you mentioned that, well, we also saw Mr. Takaichi there and so on. We have actually other two questions, and one of them is again about Mr. Takaichi, and the other one is about Seiko Noda. So about the Takaichi-san, actually, it is, we know that a lot of industrial, let's say, giants support her and her candidacy, as candidacy for the presidential seat of the LDP and, well, potentially as the prime minister here. And I think that I saw that actually on Twitter from Rintaro Nishimura. He published that one. There is Shouko Research, Nihon Shouko Research, and they say that actually she's got the highest level of support by the industry here. But we also know that basically that support, if you don't have the necessary support within the LDP, then it doesn't matter that much, how many people support you from outside of the party. So what do you think is the dynamic between, the industry and her candidacy and also her, let's say the potential of her becoming the president of the LDP?
That's a great question. When you she's not going anywhere. She will be in Japanese politics. She's still young enough to run again for a prime minister. Yeah, she has a good shot at becoming prime minister. She is sharp as a whip. And she, on the conservative end of the LDP, so the LDP, it's like a big circus tent. We always talk about the various factions that comprise that. The factions have become somewhat amalgamated. There's a little bit more fluidity there, but there is a conservative end, and then there's a more of a liberal end. It's the Liberal Democratic Party. It's big business, and she is on more of the conservative side of the LDP. So she has a lot of supporters. She has visited Yasukuni. She's not ashamed. She doesn't hide it. She's very bold about it, and I think that the industrial giants like that about her. Keidan Ren, the big business, like that. She is very pro-business and pro-economy. She made a comment the other day critical of the Bank of Japan. Few people are willing to do that. Konotaro did. But there is some repercussions for doing that. You lose some people by saying, criticizing the Bank of Japan or what's going on with the yen or the economy. But she is unashamed and unafraid. She is just terrific. I just don't know if she has all of the makings, as you identified, to become prime minister this round, but she's not going anywhere. And after this election, definitely she will be in the cabinet. She won't be economic security minister. She will be in a far more meaningful role. And I think the next time the election comes up, she's going to be a tough candidate to beat. And the dynamics will be completely different too.
I see. Well, at that time, it will be yet again even more interesting to watch. Okay, thank you for that. And we're moving once again to LinkedIn. So from Hiroko-san. Hiroko-san writes, Seiko Noda withdraws her candidacy, becomes Koizumi's endorser.
That's right.
Other candidates' camps say, well, Noda sold herself at the highest price at the right time. So what are your thoughts on this? What does this mean?
It's the same story as with anybody. Noda, yeah, it's difficult to say selling out because it's politics. Politics is about numbers. It's about coalitions. It's about forming groups. I mean, that's why the factions made so much sense in Japanese politics. And even with this decision by Mr. Kishida to disband the factions, they still exist in some form. It's too much of a part of how you get politics moving and how you get decisions made. So I think it's unfair to say she sold herself out. But yes, she voted with Koizumi because if Mr. Koizumi wins. So in my view, and it changes all the time because the candidates are now on TV and they're expressing themselves and they're looking good, and sometimes they're not looking so good. But in my mind, the race is really between Koizumi, Ishiba, and Konotaro. And I think other people, at least inside Nagatacho, where the politicians reside and where they do their business, I think it's a race between those three, and how well you do compared to them and in supporting them in the second round, right? So you bring your voters over and you vote in the second round for one of these people, then your possibility of having a parliamentary cabinet seat, or even if it's not going to be a cabinet seat, which is a real disappointment, at least you're going to have a committee seat, a budget committee seat or foreign affairs, something very powerful that puts you in the spotlight and kind of guarantees that the next time there's an election, well, most of these people, if you've been in the Diet for 5 terms, it's hard to defeat you unless you screw up or you sleep around or you gamble or you steal money. It's hard for you not to be repeated for a 6th or 7th time. But it's the positions that you want. You want that role so that you can bring more benefits to the voters who voted for you, even if you're maybe in the foreign ministry or the justice ministry. It still generates benefits to people who voted for you in your district, and they get a little bit of shine out of that too. Plus, it gives you more opportunity to build a nest egg for the election. So everybody's fighting for that. So it's not difficult to understand, and I don't think people should be criticized for selling out. It's how the dynamics of politics works. Seiko Noda voting for Koizumi is big because she's not a pushover. She's not going to sell out to just for monetary purposes. She's doing that because she truly believes that Koizumi has the best chance of becoming prime minister. You should listen to that.
Yes, indeed. But I still have difficulty believing that the nationwide membership of the LDP is ready for Koizumi-san.
You never know, you just never know. I mean, the fight now is get to the second round,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, right.
And we've seen him on TV, and it's as you would expect when he's on TV and when he answers questions or when he dodges questions. It's kind of what you would expect. He's unseasoned, he's untrained. He needs a little bit more experience, but that comes out in the wash. So I know there's a lot of excitement. I'm kind of in your camp, Maya, that running the country, it's a big deal. I would go with experience and personality. And when I come up with that, even with a toss-up between Konotaro and Ishiba, I'd prefer to see Konotaro representing the country and doing things in the country than Mr. Ishiba. I just hear him talk and I'm just thinking, God, can you finish your sentence? Can you talk a little bit more quickly? And could you look at the cameras not so disdainfully? But
Right.
but he's working on it. He's got somebody working on his hair and his complexion, and if you take a look, just the physical appearance of these people, what they're wearing, the suits and the ties, and it's just fantastic. It's really a microcosm into what's going on, not just in Japanese politics, but what's going on culturally and not spiritually, but it's just so interesting to see this dynamic come together. So all of these things, you should really pay attention to because they're all very meaningful.
Right. Okay, so I'm going now to other questions. One of them is in Clubhouse from Ryan, and the other one is from Yuka. I'm trying to figure out which came first, and it seems that the one from Ryan came first actually. So Ryan's question is: a few weeks ago, we talked about how whomever is elected will likely have a very rough term as a prime minister.
Yeah.
So, what do you think the candidates are preparing to do in their term to attempt to mitigate this damage?
That's a great question, Ryan. I think one of the first things that they're going to do is have an economic stimulus package. I think they're going to give people money and try and reduce the inflation, the cost of living, the price of gas. I think that they will do that because the funds are there to do that. It's just in terms of timing, and kind of riding that wave. But yeah, then there's a little bit of hell to pay, because now what are you going to do? Are you going to increase taxes? Are you going to stop this 2% inflation for defense spending? We're in year 3. You still got 2 more years. We haven't even been explained how it's going to be paid for. So, Mr. President or Mr. Prime Minister, could you please explain? Because Kishida never did. You've got these 4 pockets of financing that you've said is going to pay for that additional 1% of GDP. It's not really been explained. So please tell us about that. And by the way, thank you very much for your cat's tail is totally distracting. Very suggestive, Maya. Gosh. We appreciate the economic stimulus package, but are you going to increase the consumption tax? It's now at 10%. Is it going to go higher? And people are already saying, Konotaro was mentioning the consumption tax and how he wants to reduce it, actually. But also, he's very strong on the defense budget as well. I think he would make a great prime minister. But yes, whoever's going to be prime minister, it's going to be fractious. It's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, we've got Hiroaki's comment on YouTube here saying Takaichi Kono or Kono Takaichi. This combination for PM and Vice PM is theoretically good at this point of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you can't discount Kobayashi.
Right.
Kobayashi, I mean, a bit of a sleeper. Not many people knew him. He's only 4 terms in the Diet. He came out of being a bureaucrat, working in one of the ministries. He's from Chiba. But boy, he has rocketed up, as you saw in the numbers that we displayed.
Yes.
He is a very popular candidate, and who knows? He could rock up there and be one of the 2 choices that we have. But like Takaichi, he's not going anywhere. He's stamped his name in the pantheon of who will be leading Japan in the next 10 years or so. And he's still young, so it could be even longer than that. But yeah, it's actually a very good sign that Japan has this many leaders who are willing to come up. And you might remember, every time it came up with Mr. Abe, can we have another? No, Mr. Abe, who can compare to Mr. Abe? We don't have anybody else. And with Mr. Kishida, we need a new prime minister. Yeah, but nobody can do it because he's the best. And I can't think. We all knew that was hogwash, but people just don't raise their hand. I would like to be prime minister. That, Konotaro tried that once and was slapped down. What the hell? We're speaking out of turn. Nobody asked you. Sit back down. But now you've got these 9 individuals. Any one of them would, I think, make a great prime minister. We need whatever, even Koizumi, whatever he can bring to the table. Japan needs it. Yeah.
I think that most than anything, though, Japan needs really stability, because we remember what happened. I don't remember how many years, but for several years, actually, there was a string of prime ministers.
Before Abe's second term, yeah.
Yes, before Abe's second term. And I think that nobody wants that at this point in time, right? So stability is really maybe the highest priority. And whoever brings that maybe is, but I'm not sure that people actually are thinking that far away, the general population in Japan.
I agree. I don't think people are thinking that far ahead. And in any event, in a sea of instability, having stability is very difficult. I mean, we just talked about North Korea launching the rockets and the bear, circling Japan, and the Canadians coming in and saying we want reciprocal rights, and SDF soldiers can be stationed in Canada and we can station our troops in Japan, and it's the same reciprocal rights that you have with the Philippines and England and I mean, this is just, it's crazy. It's crazy what's going on, but we have to keep on top of it.
Right. All right. So thank you for that. And I'm moving now to Yuka's question. So she writes, thanks for another great session. Please see my question below. So the question is, for the LDP leadership race, I understand that the public favorite is Mr. Koizumi. However, according to the most recent survey by TV Tokyo, LDP members choose Mr. Ishiba as the most suitable leader. Surprisingly, Mr. Takaichi was ranked second, followed by Mr. Koizumi.
Yeah.
Since the LDP members choose their leader, would TV Tokyo survey have better predictive power than the public opinion polls?
That's a great question, and you can tell what the answer is because of the dynamics of the LDP election. In the first round, you have 367 votes represented by 367 Diet members, and then you have 367 votes distributed among 1,500,000 LDP card-carrying members. And that's they're not equal. I mean, one person has one vote here, and then several thousand hold one vote on the other side. But they both have an opportunity to vote, and we already know that in the first round, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. Nobody is going to win predominantly 50%. So that's not where the race is. But what's determined in the first race is who's on top, who's number two. Then we cancel out the rest of the candidates, and then we have the next election, and the 367 Diet members, they vote again among the two candidates that are presented, and then the 367 votes that are distributed to the members of the LDP card-carrying individuals, those are amalgamated into the 47 prefectures. And so it becomes 367 versus 47. So it's the Diet members have more than an 85% predominance of who is going to be selected than the 15% of the LDP card-carrying members. I hope that comes across. It's a little bit complicated, but that's basically the layout. And,
Right.
and it kind of answers the question: who cares what the public thinks? The public, if I'm an LDP member, I'm going to listen, but I also am curious about what my role is going to be, and I hold more sway. I'll listen to you as the public, and I might listen to you a little bit more if you're a card-carrying LDP member, but my interests really take prominence in the second round, and the second round decides who's going to be the prime minister.
Right. But still, we have a comment which is very, I think, very telling here from Seichiro-san, Seichiro Manabe-san. He writes, Mr. Takaichi is considered too conservative, and this is
Yeah.
probably, not only within the LDP, but within or among the general population of the country here. So, well, but we'll see. Okay, and another comment and question from Hiroko-san. In the debate for the LDP presidency on TV Asahi, it seemed that Mr. Koizumi was unable to leave much of an impression, especially on economic-related
Yep.
questions. On the other hand, NHK seemed to deliberately avoid economic-related questions. Are they being considered? Or no, are they being considered? I think this is about the NHK. Is NHK being considered? Did NHK show consideration because it is Japan's public broadcaster?
Bingo.
Bingo, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So NHK is the public mouthpiece for the government. The president of NHK is hand appointed by the prime minister. So he serves at the pleasure of the prime minister. There was a comment that was made by one of the outline staff members just this last week about China. And it was a Chinese national who works for NHK, not in Tokyo, but in one of the regions, who made a comment about Japan being too boisterous and they should return the islands and stuff like that. So, of course, he was immediately fired for that, speaking out of turn. But the person who he reported to, a division director, had to resign as a consequence of that. So it's very tightly monitored. It's very tightly controlled. The fact that the economy was not pushed so hard is not a mistake. And it's probably one of those areas where you would think Mr. Koizumi has been boned up on all of these issues, but if it's not your daily bread and butter, it's not something you're doing all the time. It's difficult to respond on the fly with acuteness and succinctness. Uh, when all the lights are on you. So I don't know if it was a protective measure or just a way to kind of keep things a little bit more even. It's early in the
Mhm.
race, so let's not try and identify somebody on their weakest part. Let's just try and over the next couple of days, it will filter out. And so following it over the next couple of days while they're on this road trip is going to be a bit of a vetting process. And then it'll get really hot the week before the election.
Okay, right. Thanks for that comment as well, Timothy. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. And I thought Manabe-san's question was very good too. So
Yes,
it wasn't a question. It was
a statement,
a
an
statement, an
observation.
observation, but
Yes,
also very good about the conservative wing of the LDP and about Miss Takaichi. Yeah, I can't say
yes.
anything more that I already said about her.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. And let me check Clubhouse once again, but it looks like we have gone through most of the questions. Uh, Okay, so just a comment from Ryan in Clubhouse. So he says, yes, what you said makes a lot of sense to me. I also feel that Konutaro would be a good PM, but yes, it looks like it would be a tumultuous term for anyone.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then with this, somebody's okay. Thank you, Hiroko-san. Yes, it was a pleasure having you once again, everybody sticking with us.
Woohoo!
And Timothy, now, don't take that hat off. You
Oh
will be
God.
everybody.
But we're getting ready to sign off, and it doesn't say MAGA. It says, what is that? The Giants? No, San Francisco.
San Francisco, that's it. Yes, that's great. Okay, so thank you, Timothy, really for the time and for the effort, for the explanation, the analysis and everything. It has
Thank you,
been
Maya.
insightful. This session has been insightful for me as well. And before we close up, I want to say once again a big thank you to our sponsors, Kanachu.com, James, and also Houze Inc, Hanako, Hana Uroshizawa Howell. Once again, please connect with them if you have any ideas for projects in real estate, and if you live in the Kanto area. So they are available on LinkedIn. Also, you can find their contact details in the description of the YouTube video. So you can speak to them in either English or Japanese. So please feel free to do that and enjoy working with them. Thanks again to everybody and have a great weekend. We have a long weekend actually here in Japan, a 3-day weekend, and we are in the middle of it. I hope that you have a great Sunday and a wonderful Monday as well.
Yes.
Tim, thanks a lot indeed.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
See you next week.